He was interrupted by a phone call from a Johnny Fontaine, bubbling with high spirits. The picture had been shot, the rushes, whatever the hell they were, Hagen thought, were fabulous. He was sending the Don a present for Christmas that would knock his eyes out. He'd bring it himself, but there were some little things to be done in the movie. He would have to stay out on the coast. Hagen tried to conceal his impatience. Johnny Fontaine's charm had always been lost on him, but his interest was aroused.
What is it?
Johnny Fontaine chuckled and said,
I can't tell. That's the best part of a Christmas present.
Hagen immediately lost all interest and finally managed, politely, to hang up. 10 minutes later, his secretary told him that Connie Corleone was on the phone and wanted to speak to him. Hagen sighed. As a young girl, Connie had been nice. As a married woman, she was a nuisance. She made complaints about her husband. She kept going home to visit her mother for 2 or 3 days. And Carlo Rizzi was turning out to be a real loser. He had been fixed up with a nice little business and was running it into the ground. He was also drinking, whoring around, gambling, and beating his wife up occasionally. Connie hadn't told her family about that, but she had told Hagen. He wondered what new tale of woe she had for him now. But the Christmas spirit seemed to have cheered her up. She just wanted to ask Hagen what her father would really like for Christmas. And Sonny, and Fred, and Mike. She already knew what she would get her mother. Hagen made some suggestions, all of which she rejected as silly. Finally, she let him go. When the phone rang again, Hagen threw his papers back into the basket. The hell with it, he'd leave. It never occurred to him to refuse to take the call, however. When his secretary told him it was Michael Corleone, he picked up the phone with pleasure. He'd always liked Mike.
Tom, I'm driving down to the city with Kay tomorrow. There's something important I want to tell the old man before Christmas. Will he be home tomorrow night?
Sure. He's not going out of town until after Christmas. Anything I can do for you?
Michael was as close-mouthed as his father.
No. I guess I'll see you at Christmas. Everybody's going to be out at Long Beach, right?
Right.
He was amused when Mike hung up on him without any small talk. He told his secretary to call his wife and tell her he would be home a little late, but to have some supper for him. Outside the building, he walked briskly downtown toward Macy's. Someone stepped in his way. To his surprise, he saw it was Sollazzo. Sollazzo took him by the arm and said quietly,
Don't be frightened, I just want to talk to you.
A car parked at the curb suddenly had its door open. Sollazzo said urgently,
Get in, I want to talk to you.
Hagen pulled his arm loose. He was still not alarmed, just irritated.
I haven't got time.
At that moment, 2 men came up behind him. Hagen felt a sudden weakness in his legs. Sollazzo said softly,
Get in the car. If I wanted to kill you, you'd be dead now. Trust me.
Without a shred of trust, Hagen got into the car. Michael Corleone had lied to Hagen. He was already in New York, and he had called from a room in the Hotel Pennsylvania, less than 10 blocks away. When he hung up the phone, Kay Adams put out her cigarette.
Mike, what a good fibber you are.
Michael sat down beside her on the bed.
All for you, honey. If I told my family we were in town, we'd have to go there right away. Then we couldn't go out to dinner, we couldn't go to the theater, and we couldn't sleep together tonight. Not in my father's house, not when we're not married.
He put his arms around her and kissed her gently on the lips. Her mouth was sweet, and he gently pulled her down on the bed. She closed her eyes, waiting for him to make love to her, and Michael felt an enormous happiness. He had spent the war years fighting in the Pacific, and on those bloody islands he had dreamed of a girl like Kay Adams, of a beauty like hers, a fair and fragile body, milky-skinned and electrified by passion. She opened her eyes and then pulled his head down to kiss him. They made love until it was time for dinner and the theater. After dinner, they walked past the brightly lit department stores full of holiday shoppers, and Michael said to her,
What shall I get you for Christmas?
She pressed against him.
Just you. Do you think your father will approve of me?
That's not really the question. Will your parents approve of me?
Kay shrugged.
I don't care.
I haven't thought of changing my name, legally. But if something happened, that wouldn't really help. You sure you want to be a Corleone?
He said it only half-jokingly.
Yes.
She said without smiling. They pressed against each other. They had decided to get married during Christmas week, a quiet, civil ceremony at City Hall with just 2 friends as witnesses. But Michael had insisted he must tell his father. He had explained that his father would not object in any way as long as it was not done in secrecy. Kay was doubtful. She said she could not tell her parents until after the marriage.
Of course they'll think I'm pregnant.
Michael grinned.
So will my parents.
What neither of them mentioned was the fact that Michael would have to cut his close ties with his family. They both understood that Michael had already done so to some extent, and yet they both felt guilty about this fact. They planned to finish college, seeing each other weekends and living together during summer vacations. It seemed like a happy life. The play was a musical called Carousel, and its sentimental story of a braggart thief made them smile at each other with amusement. When they came out of the theater, it had turned cold. Kay snuggled up to him.
After we're married, will you beat me and then steal a star for a present?
Michael laughed.
I'm going to be a mathematics professor. Do you want something to eat before we go to the hotel?
Kay shook her head. She looked up at him meaningfully. As always, he was touched by her eagerness to make love. He smiled down at her, and they kissed in the cold street. Michael felt hungry, and he decided to order sandwiches sent up to the room. In the hotel lobby, Michael pushed Kay toward the newsstand.
Get the papers while I get the key.
He had to wait in a small line. The hotel was still short of help despite the end of the war. Michael got his room key and looked around impatiently for Kay. She was standing by the newsstand, staring down at a newspaper she held in her hand. He walked toward her. She looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with tears.
Oh, Mike. Oh, Mike.
He took the paper from her hands. The first thing he saw was a photo of his father lying in the street, his head in a pool of blood. A man was sitting on the curb, weeping like a child. It was his brother Freddie. Michael Corleone felt his body turning to ice. There was no grief, no fear, just cold rage. He said to Kay,
Go up to the room.
But he had to take her by the arm and lead her into the elevator. They rode up together in silence. In their room, Michael sat down on the bed and opened the paper. The headline said, Vito Corleone shot. Alleged racket chief critically wounded. Operated on under heavy police guard. Bloody mob war feared. Michael felt the weakness in his legs.
He's not dead. The bastards didn't kill him.
He read the story again. His father had been shot at 5 in the afternoon. That meant that while he had been making love to Kay, having dinner, enjoying the theater, his father was near death. Michael felt sick with guilt.
Shall we go down to the hospital now?
Michael shook his head.
Let me call the house first. The people who did this are crazy. And now that the old man's still alive, they'll be desperate. Who the hell knows what they'll pull next?
Both phones in the Long Beach house were busy, and it was almost 20 minutes before Michael could get through. He heard Sonny's voice saying,
Yeah?
Sonny, it's me.
He could hear the relief in Sonny's voice.
Jesus, kid. You had us worried. Where the hell are you? I've sent people to that hick town of yours to see what happened.
How's the old man? How bad is he hurt?
Pretty bad. They shot him 5 times, but he's tough.
Sonny's voice was proud.
The doctor said he'll pull through. Listen, kid, I'm busy. I can't talk. Where are you?
In New York. Didn't Tom tell you I was coming down?
They've snatched Tom. That's why I was worried about you. His wife is here. She don't know, and neither do the cops. I don't want them to know. The bastard who pulled this must be crazy. I want you to get out here right away and keep your mouth shut, okay?
Okay. Do you know who did it?
Sure. And as soon as Luca Brasi checks in, they're going to be dead meat. We still have all the horses.
I'll be out in an hour, in a cab.
He hung up. The papers had been on the streets for over 3 hours. There must have been radio news reports. It was almost impossible that Luca hadn't heard the news. Thoughtfully, Michael pondered the question. Where was Luca Brasi? It was the same question that Hagen was asking himself at that moment. It was the same question that was worrying Sonny Corleone out in Long Beach. At 4:45 that afternoon, Don Corleone had finished checking the papers the office manager of his olive oil company had prepared for him. He put on his jacket and rapped his knuckles on his son Freddie's head to make him take his nose out of the afternoon newspaper.
Tell Gatto to get the car from the lot. I'll be ready to go home in a few minutes.
Freddie grunted.
I'll have to get it myself. Paulie called in sick this morning. Got a cold again.
Don Corleone looked thoughtful for a moment.
That's the 3rd time this month. I think maybe you'd better get a healthier fella for this job. Tell Tom.
Fred protested.
Paulie's a good kid. If he says he's sick, he's sick. I don't mind getting the car.
He left the office. Don Corleone watched out the window as his son crossed 9th Avenue to the parking lot. He stopped to call Hagen's office, but there was no answer. He called the house at Long Beach, but again, there was no answer. Irritated, he looked out the window. His car was parked at the curb in front of his building. Freddie was leaning against the fender, arms folded, watching the throng of Christmas shoppers. Don Corleone put on his jacket. The office manager helped him with his overcoat. Don Corleone grunted his thanks and went out the door and started down the 2 flights of steps. Out in the street, the early winter light was failing. Freddie leaned casually against the fender of the heavy Buick. When he saw his father come out of the building, Freddie went out into the street to the driver's side of the car and got in. Don Corleone was about to get in on the sidewalk side of the car when he hesitated and then turned back to the long, open fruit stand near the corner. This had been his habit lately. He loved the big out-of-season fruits, yellow peaches and oranges that glowed in their green boxes. The proprietor sprang to serve him. Don Corleone did not handle the fruit. He pointed. The fruit man disputed his decisions only once, to show him that one of his choices had a rotten underside. Don Corleone took the paper bag in his left hand and paid the man with a $5 bill. He took his change, and as he turned to go back to the waiting car, 2 men stepped from around the corner. Don Corleone knew immediately what was to happen. The 2 men wore black overcoats and black hats pulled low to prevent identification by witnesses. They had not expected Don Corleone's alert reaction. He dropped the bag of fruit and darted toward the parked car with startling quickness for a man of his bulk. At the same time he shouted,
"Fredo! Fredo!"
It was only then that the 2 men drew their guns and fired. The first bullet caught Don Corleone in the back. He felt the hammer shock of its impact, but made his body move toward the car. The next 2 bullets hit him in the buttocks and sent him sprawling in the middle of the street. Meanwhile, the 2 gunmen, careful not to slip on the rolling fruit, started to follow in order to finish him off. At that moment, perhaps no more than 5 seconds after the Don's call to his son, Federico Corleone appeared out of his car, looming over it. The gunman fired 2 more hasty shots at the Don lying in the gutter. One hit him in the fleshy part of his arm, and the second hit him in the calf of his right leg. Though these wounds were the least serious, they bled profusely, forming small pools of blood beside his body. But by this time, Don Corleone had lost consciousness. Freddie had heard his father shout, calling him by his childhood name, and then he had heard the first 2 loud reports. By the time he got out of the car, he was in shock. He had not even drawn his gun. The 2 assassins could easily have shot him down, but they too panicked. They must have known the son was armed, and besides, too much time had passed. They disappeared around the corner, leaving Freddie alone in the street with his father's bleeding body. Many of the people thronging the avenue had flung themselves into doorways or on the ground. Others had huddled together in small groups. Freddie still had not drawn his weapon. He seemed stunned. He stared down at his father's body lying face down on the tarred street, lying now in what seemed to him a blackish lake of blood. Freddie went into physical shock. People eddied out again, and someone, seeing him start to sag, led him to the curbstone and made him sit down on it. A crowd gathered around Don Corleone's body, a circle that shattered when the first police car sirened a path through them. Directly behind the police was the Daily News radio car, and even before it stopped, a photographer jumped out to snap pictures of the bleeding Don Corleone. A few moments later, an ambulance arrived. The photographer turned his attention to Freddie Corleone, who was now weeping openly, and this was a curiously comical sight because of his tough, Cupid-featured face, heavy nose, and thick mouth smeared with snot. Detectives were spreading through the crowd, and more police cars were coming up. One detective knelt beside Freddie, questioning him, but Freddie was too deep in shock to answer. The detective reached inside Freddie's coat and lifted his wallet. He looked at the identification inside and whistled to his partner. In just a few seconds, Freddie had been cut off from the crowd by a flock of plainclothesmen. The first detective found Freddie's gun in its shoulder holster and took it. Then they lifted Freddie off his feet and shoved him into an unmarked car. As that car pulled away, it was followed by the Daily News radio car. The photographer was still snapping pictures of everybody and everything. In the half hour after the shooting of his father, Sonny Corleone received 5 phone calls in rapid succession. The first was from Detective John Phillips, who was on the family payroll and had been in the lead car of plainclothesmen at the scene of the shooting. First thing he said to Sonny over the phone was,
"Do you recognize my voice?"
Yeah.
He was fresh from a nap, called to the phone by his wife. Phillips said quickly, without preamble,
"Somebody shot your father outside his place 15 minutes ago. He's alive, but hurt, bad. They've taken him to French Hospital. They got your brother Freddie down at the Chelsea precinct. You better get him a doctor when they turn him loose. I'm going down to the hospital now to help question your old man if he can talk. I'll keep you posted."
Across the table, Sonny's wife, Sandra, noticed that her husband's face had gone red with flushing blood. His eyes were glazed over. She whispered,
"What's the matter?"
He waved at her impatiently to shut up, swung his body away so that his back was toward her, and said into the phone,
You sure he's alive?
Yeah, I'm sure. A lot of blood, but I think maybe he's not as bad as he looks.
Thanks. Be home tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. You got a grand coming.
Sonny cradled the phone. He forced himself to sit still. He knew that his greatest weakness was his anger, and this was one time when anger could be fatal. The first thing to do was get Tom Hagen, but before he could pick up the phone, it rang. The call was from the bookmaker licensed by the family to operate in the district of the Don's office. The bookmaker had called to tell him that the Don had been killed, shot dead in the street. After a few questions to make sure that the bookmaker's informant had not been close to the body, Sonny dismissed the information as incorrect. Phillips' dope would be more accurate. The phone rang almost immediately a third time. It was a reporter from the Daily News. As soon as he identified himself, Sonny Corleone hung up. He dialed Hagen's house and asked Hagen's wife,
Did Tom come home yet?
She said no, that he was not due for another 20 minutes, but she expected him home for supper.
Have him call me.
He tried to think things out. He tried to imagine how his father would react in a like situation. He had known immediately that this was an attack by Sollozzo, but Sollozzo would never have dared to eliminate so high-ranking a leader as the Don unless he was backed by other powerful people. The phone, ringing for the fourth time, interrupted his thoughts. The voice on the other end was very soft, very gentle.
Santino Corleone,
Yeah.
we have Tom Hagen. In about 3 hours, he'll be released with our proposition. Don't do anything rash until you've heard what he has to say. It could only cause a lot of trouble. What's done is done. Everybody has to be sensible now. Don't lose that famous temper of yours.
The voice was slightly mocking. Sonny couldn't be sure, but it sounded like Sollozzo. He made his voice sound muted, depressed.
I'll wait.
He heard the receiver on the other end click. He looked at his heavy, gold-banded wristwatch and noted the exact time of the call and jotted it down on the tablecloth. He sat at the kitchen table, frowning. His wife asked,
Sonny, what is it?
They shot the old man.
He saw the shock on her face.
Don't worry, he's not dead, and nothing else is going to happen.
He did not tell her about Hagen. And then the phone rang for the fifth time. It was Clemenza. The fat man's voice came wheezing over the phone in grunt-like gasps.
You hear about your father?
Yeah, but he's not dead.
There was a long pause over the phone, and then Clemenza's voice came packed with emotion.
Thank God, thank God. You sure? I got worried he was dead in the street.
He's alive.
He was listening intently to every intonation in Clemenza's voice. The emotion had seemed genuine, but it was part of the fat man's profession to be a good actor.
You will have to carry the ball, Sonny. What do you want me to do?
Get over to my father's house. Bring Paulie Gatto.
That's all. Don't you want me to send some people to the hospital in your place?
No, I just want you and Paulie Gatto.
There was a long pause. Clemenza was getting the message. To make it a little more natural, Sonny asked,
Where the hell was Paulie anyway? What the hell was he doing?
There was no longer any wheezing on the other end of the line. Clemenza's voice was guarded.
Paulie was sick. He had a cold, so he stayed home. He's been a little sick all winter.
Sonny was instantly alert.
How many times did he stay home the last couple of months?
Maybe 3 or 4 times. I always asked Freddie if he wanted another guy, but he said no. There's been no cause. The last 10 years, things been smooth, you know.
Yeah. I'll see you at my father's house. Be sure you bring Paulie. Pick him up on your way over. I don't care how sick he is. You got that?
He slammed down the phone without waiting for an answer. His wife was weeping silently. He stared at her for a moment, then said in a harsh voice,
Any of our people call, tell them to get me in my father's house on his special phone. Anybody else call, you don't know nothing. If Tom's wife calls, tell her that Tom won't be home for a while. He's on business.
He pondered for a moment.
A couple of our people will come to stay here.
He saw her look of fright.
You don't have to be scared. I just want them here. Do whatever they tell you to do. If you want to talk to me, give me on Pop's special phone, but don't call me unless it's really important. And don't worry.
He went out of the house. Darkness had fallen, and the December wind whipped through them all. Sonny had no fear about stepping out into the night. All 8 houses were owned by Don Corleone. At the mouth of the mall, the 2 houses on either side were rented by family retainers with their own families and star boarders, single men who lived in the basement apartments. Of the remaining 6 houses that formed the rest of the half-circle, 1 was inhabited by Tom Hagen and his family, his own, and the smallest and least ostentatious, by the Don himself. The other 3 houses were given rent-free to retired friends of the Don, with the understanding that they would be vacated whenever he requested. The harmless-looking mall was an impregnable fortress. All 8 houses were equipped with floodlights, which bathed the grounds around them and made them all impossible to lurk in. Sonny went across the street to his father's house and let himself inside with his own key.
Ma, where are you?
His mother came out of the kitchen. Behind her rose the smell of frying peppers. Before she could say anything, Sonny took her by the arm and made her sit down.
I just got a call. Now don't get worried. Pop's in the hospital. He's hurt. Get dressed and get ready to get down there. I'll have a car and a driver for you in a little while, okay?
His mother looked at him steadily for a moment and then asked in Italian,
Have they shot him?
Sonny nodded. His mother bowed her head for a moment. Then she went back into the kitchen. Sonny followed her. He watched her turn off the gas under the pan full of peppers and then go out and up to the bedroom. He took peppers from the pan and bread from the basket on the table and made a sloppy sandwich with hot olive oil dripping from his fingers. He went into the huge corner room that was his father's office and took the special phone from a locked cabinet box. The phone had been especially installed and was listed under a phony name and a phony address. The first person he called was Luca Brasi. There was no answer. Then he called the safety valve Capo Regime in Brooklyn, a man of unquestioned loyalty to the Don. This man's name was Tessio. Sonny told him what had happened and what he wanted. Tessio was to recruit 50 absolutely reliable men. He was to send guards to the hospital. He was to send men out to Long Beach to work there. Tessio asked,
Did they get Clemenza, too?
I don't want to use Clemenza's people right now.
Tessio understood immediately. There was a pause, and then he said,
Excuse me, Sonny. I say this as your father would say it. Don't move too fast. I can't believe Clemenza would betray us.
Thanks. I don't think so, but I have to be careful, right?
Right.
Another thing. My kid brother Mike goes to college in Hanover, New Hampshire. Get some people we know in Boston to go up and get him and bring him down here to the house until this blows over. I'll call him up so he'll expect them. Again, I'm just playing the percentages just to make sure.
Okay. I'll be over your father's house as soon as I get things rolling. Okay? You know my boys, right?
Yeah.
He hung up. He went over to a small wall safe and unlocked it. From it, he took an indexed book bound in blue leather. He opened it to the T's until he found the entry he was looking for. It read, Ray Farrell, $5,000, Christmas Eve. This was followed by a telephone number. Sonny dialed the number and said,
Farrell?
The man on the other end answered.
Yes?
This is Santino Corleone. I want you to do me a favor, and I want you to do it right away. I want you to check 2 phone numbers and give me all the calls they got and all the calls they made for the last 3 months.
He gave Farrell the number of Paulie Gatto's home and Clemenza's home.
This is important. Get it to me before midnight, and you'll have an extra very Merry Christmas.
Before he settled back to think things out, he gave Luca Brasi's number one more call. Again, there was no answer. This worried him, but he put it out of his mind. Luca would come to the house as soon as he heard the news. Sonny leaned back in the swivel chair. In an hour, the house would be swarming with family people, and he would have to tell them all what to do. And now that he finally had time to think, he realized how serious the situation was. It was the first challenge to the Corleone family and their power in 10 years. There was no doubt that Sollozzo was behind it, but he would never have dared attempt such a stroke unless he had support from at least one of the 5 great New York families. And that support must have come from the Tattaglias, which meant a full-scale war or an immediate settlement on Sollozzo's terms. Sonny smiled grimly. The wily Turk had planned well, but he had been unlucky. The old man was alive, and so it was war. With Luca Brasi and the resources of the Corleone family, there could be but one outcome. But again, the nagging worry. Where was Luca Brasi? Chapter 3. Counting the driver, there were 4 men in the car with Hagen. They put him in the back seat, in the middle of the 2 men who had come up behind him in the street. Sollozzo sat up front. The man on Hagen's right reached over across his body and tilted Hagen's hat over his eyes so that he could not see.
Don't even move your pinky.
It was a short ride, not more than 20 minutes, and when they got out of the car, Hagen could not recognize the neighborhood because darkness had fallen. They led him into a basement apartment and made him sit on a straight-backed kitchen chair. Sollozzo sat across the kitchen table from him. His dark face had a peculiarly vulturine look.
I don't want you to be afraid. I know you're not the muscle end of the family. I want you to help the Corleones, and I want you to help me.
Hagen's hands were shaking as he put a cigarette in his mouth. One of the men brought a bottle of rye to the table and gave him a slug of it in a china coffee cup. Hagen drank the fiery liquid gratefully, steadied his hands, and took the weakness out of his legs.
Your boss is dead.
He paused, surprised at the tears that sprang to Hagen's eyes. Then he went on.
We got him outside his office, in the street. As soon as I got the word, I picked you up. You have to make the peace between me and Sonny.
Hagen didn't answer. He was surprised at his own grief, and the feeling of desolation mixed with his fear of death. Sollozzo was speaking again.
Sonny was hot for my deal, right? You know it's a smart thing to do, too. Narcotics is a coming thing. There's so much money in it that everybody can get rich just in a couple of years. The Don was an old mustache Pete. His day was over, but he didn't know it. Now he's dead. Nothing can bring him back. I'm ready to make a new deal. I want you to talk Sonny into taking it.
Hagen said,
You haven't got a chance. Sonny will come after you with everything he's got.
That's going to be his first reaction. You have to talk some sense to him. The Tattaglia family stands behind me with all their people. The other New York families will go along with anything that will stop a full-scale war between us. Our war has to hurt them and their businesses. If Sonny goes along with the deal, the other families in the country will consider it none of their affair, even a Don's oldest friends.
Hagen stared down at his hands, not answering. Sollozzo went on persuasively.
The Don was slipping. In the old days, I could never have gotten to him. The other families distrust him because he made you his consigliere, and you're not even Italian, much less Sicilian. If it goes to all-out war, the Corleone family will be smashed, and everybody loses, me included. I need the family political contacts more than I need the money, even. So talk to Sonny. Talk to the capo regimes. You'll save a lot of bloodshed.
Hagen held out his china cup for more whiskey.
I'll try. But Sonny is strong-headed. And even Sonny won't be able to call off Luca. You have to worry about Luca. I'll have to worry about Luca if I go for your deal.
I'll take care of Luca. You take care of Sonny and the other two kids. Listen, you can tell him that Freddie would have gotten it today with his old man, but my people had strict orders not to gun him. I didn't want any more hard feelings than necessary. You can tell him that. Freddie's alive because of me.
Finally, Hagen's mind was working. For the first time, he really believed that Sollozzo did not mean to kill him or hold him as a hostage. The sudden relief from fear that flooded his body made him flush with shame. Sollozzo watched him with a quiet, understanding smile. Hagen began to think things out. If he did not agree to argue Sollozzo's case, he might be killed. But then he realized that Sollozzo expected him only to present it, and present it properly, as he was bound to do as a responsible consigliere. And now, thinking about it, he also realized that Sollozzo was right. An unlimited war between the Tattaglias and the Corleones must be avoided at all costs. The Corleones must bury their dead and forget, make a deal. And then, when the time was right, they could move against Sollozzo. But glancing up, he realized that Sollozzo knew exactly what he was thinking. The Turk was smiling, and then it struck Hagen. What had happened to Luca Brasi that Sollozzo was so unconcerned? Had Luca made a deal? He remembered that on the night Don Corleone had refused Sollozzo, Luca had been summoned into the office for a private conference with the Don. But now was not the time to worry about such details. He had to get back to the safety of the Corleone family fortress in Long Beach.
I'll do my best. I believe you're right. It's even what the Don would want us to do.
Sollozzo nodded gravely.
I don't like bloodshed. I'm a businessman, and blood costs too much money.
At that moment, the phone rang, and one of the men sitting behind Hagen went to answer it. He listened and then said curtly,
Okay, I'll tell him.
He hung up the phone, went to Sollozzo's side, and whispered in the Turk's ear. Hagen saw Sollozzo's face go pale, his eyes glitter with rage. He himself felt a thrill of fear. Sollozzo was looking at him speculatively, and suddenly Hagen knew that he was no longer going to be set free, that something had happened that might mean his death. Sollozzo said,
The old man is still alive. 5 bullets in a Sicilian hide, and he's still alive.
He gave a fatalistic shrug.
Bad luck. Bad luck for me. Bad luck for you.
Chapter 4. When Michael Corleone arrived at his father's house in Long Beach, he found the narrow entrance mouth of the mall blocked off with a linked chain. The mall itself was bright with the floodlights of all 8 houses, outlining at least 10 cars parked along the curving cement walk. 2 men he didn't know were leaning against the chain. One of them asked in a Brooklyn accent, "Who are you?" He told them. Another man came out of the nearest house and peered at his face. "That's the Don's kid," he said. "I'll bring him inside." Mike followed this man to his father's house, where 2 men at the door let him and his escort pass inside. The house seemed to be full of men he didn't know until he went into the living room. There, Michael saw Tom Hagen's wife, Teresa, sitting stiffly on the sofa, smoking a cigarette. On the coffee table in front of her was a glass of whiskey. On the other side of the sofa sat the bulky Clemenza. The capo regime's face was impassive, but he was sweating, and the cigar in his hand glistened slickly black with his saliva. Clemenza came to wring his hand in a consoling way, muttering,
"Your mother's at the hospital with your father. He's going to be all right."
Paulie Gatto stood up to shake hands. Michael looked at him curiously. He knew Paulie was his father's bodyguard, but did not know that Paulie had stayed home sick that day. But he sensed tension in the thin, dark face. He knew Gatto's reputation as an up-and-coming man, a very quick man who knew how to get delicate jobs done without complications, and today he had failed in his duty. He noticed several other men in the corners of the room, but he did not recognize them. They were not of Clemenza's people. Michael put these facts together and understood. Clemenza and Gatto were suspect. Thinking that Paulie had been at the scene, he asked the ferret-faced young man,
"How's Freddie? Is he okay?"
"Doctor gave him a shot. He's sleeping."
Michael went to Hagen's wife and bent down to kiss her cheek. They had always liked each other. He whispered,
"Don't worry. Tom will be okay. Have you talked to Sonny yet?"
Teresa clung to him for a moment and shook her head. She was a delicate, very pretty woman, more American than Italian, and very scared. He took her hand and lifted her off the sofa. Then he led her into his father's corner room office. Sonny was sprawled out in his chair behind the desk, holding a yellow pad in one hand and a pencil in the other. The only other man in the room with him was the capo regime, Tesio, whom Michael recognized and immediately realized that it must be his men who were in the house and forming the new palace guard. He, too, had a pencil and pad in his hands. When Sonny saw them, he came from behind the desk and took Hagen's wife in his arms.
Don't worry, Teresa. Tom's okay. They just want to give him the proposition. They said they'd turn him loose. He's not on the operating end. He's just our lawyer. There's no reason for anybody to do him harm.
He released Teresa, and then, to Michael's surprise, he too got a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He pushed Sonny away and said, grinning,
"After I get used to you beating me up, I got to put up with this."
They had often fought when they were younger. Sonny shrugged.
Listen, kid, I was worried when I couldn't get a hold of you in that hick town. Not that I gave a crap if they knocked you off, but I didn't like the idea of bringing the news to the old lady. I had to tell her about Pop.
How'd she take it?
Good. She's been through it before. Me too. You were too young to know about it, and then things got pretty smooth while you were growing up.
He paused and then said,
She's down at the hospital with the old man. He's going to pull through.
How about us going down?
Sonny shook his head and said dryly,
I can't leave this house until it's all over.
The phone rang. Sonny picked it up and listened intently. While he was listening, Michael sauntered over to the desk and glanced down at the yellow pad Sonny had been writing on. There was a list of 7 names. The first 3 were Salazzo, Philip Tattaglia, and John Tattaglia. It struck Michael with full force that he had interrupted Sonny and Tesio as they were making up a list of men to be killed. When Sonny hung up the phone, he said to Teresa Hagen and Michael,
Can you two wait outside? I got some business with Tesio we have to finish.
Was that call about Tom?
She said it almost truculently, but she was weeping with fright. Sonny put his arm around her and led her to the door.
I swear he's going to be okay. Wait in the living room. I'll come out as soon as I hear something.
He shut the door behind her. Michael had sat down in one of the big leather armchairs. Sonny gave him a quick, sharp look and then went to sit down behind the desk.
You hang around me, Mike, you're going to hear things you don't want to hear.
Michael lit a cigarette.
I can help out.
No, you can't. The old man would be sore as hell if I let you get mixed up in this.
Michael stood up and yelled,
You lousy bastard, he's my father. I'm not supposed to help him? I can help. I don't have to go out and kill people, but I can help. Stop treating me like a kid brother. I was in the war. I got shot, remember? I killed some Japs. What the hell do you think I'll do when you knock somebody off? Faint?
Sonny grinned at him.
Pretty soon you want me to put up my dukes. Okay, stick around. You can handle the phone.
He turned to Tesio.
That call I just got gave me dope we needed.
He turned to Michael.
Somebody had to finger the old man. It could have been Clemenza, it could have been Paulie Gatto, who was very conveniently sick today. I know the answer now. Let's see how smart you are, Mike. You're the college boy. Who sold out to Sollazzo?
Michael sat down again and relaxed back into the leather armchair. He thought everything over very carefully. Clemenza was a capo regime in the Corleone family structure. Don Corleone had made him a millionaire, and they had been intimate friends for over 20 years. He held one of the most powerful posts in the organization. What could Clemenza gain for betraying his Don? More money? He was rich enough, but then men are always greedy. More power? Revenge for some fancied insult or slight? That Hagen had been made the consigliere? Or perhaps a businessman's conviction that Sollazzo would win out? No, it was impossible for Clemenza to be a traitor. And then, Michael thought sadly, it was only impossible because he didn't want Clemenza to die. The fat man had always brought him gifts when he was growing up, had sometimes taken him on outings when the Don had been too busy. He could not believe that Clemenza was guilty of treachery. But on the other hand, Sollazzo would want Clemenza in his pocket more than any other man in the Corleone family. Michael thought about Paulie Gatto. Paulie, as yet, had not become rich. He was well thought of, his rise in the organization was certain, but he would have to put in his time like everybody else. Also, he would have wilder dreams of power, as the young always do. It had to be Paulie. And then Michael remembered that in the 6th grade, he and Paulie had been in the same class in school, and he didn't want it to be Paulie either. He shook his head.
Neither one of them.
But he said it only because Sonny had said he had the answer. If it had been a vote, he would have voted Paulie guilty. Sonny was smiling at him.
Don't worry, Clemenza is okay. It's Paulie.
Michael could see that Tessio was relieved. As a fellow caporegime, his sympathy would be with Clemenza. Also, the present situation was not so serious if treachery did not reach so high. Tessio said cautiously,
Then I can send my people home tomorrow?
The day after tomorrow. I don't want anybody to know about this until then. Listen, I want to talk some family business with my brother, personal. Wait out in the living room, eh? We can finish our list later. You and Clemenza will work together on it.
Sure.
Tessio went out.
How do you know for sure it's Paulie?
We have people in the telephone company, and they track down all of Paulie's phone calls in and out. Clemenza's, too. On the 3 days Paulie was sick this month, he got a call from a street booth across from the old man's building. Today, too. They were checking to see if Paulie was coming down or somebody was being sent down to take his place. Or for some other reason. It doesn't matter.
Sonny shrugged.
Thank God it was Paulie. We'll need Clemenza bad.
Is it going to be an all-out war?
Sonny's eyes were hard.
That's how I'm going to play it as soon as Tom checks in. Until the old man tells me different.
So why don't you wait until the old man can tell you?
Sonny looked at him curiously.
How the hell did you win those combat medals? We are under the gun, man. We gotta fight. I'm just afraid they won't let Tom go.
Michael was surprised at this.
Why not?
Again, Sonny's voice was patient.
They snatched Tom because they figured the old man was finished and they could make a deal with me and Tom would be the sit-down guy in the preliminary stages, carry the proposition. Now with the old man alive, they know I can't make a deal, so Tom's no good to them. They can turn him loose or dump him, depending how Sollazzo feels. If they dump him, it would be just to show us they really mean business, trying to bulldoze us.
What made Sollazzo think he could get a deal with you?
Sonny flushed, and he didn't answer for a moment. Then he said,
We had a meeting a few months ago. Sollazzo came to us with a proposition on drugs. The old man turned him down, but during the meeting I shot off my mouth a little. I showed I wanted a deal, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do. If there's one thing the old man hammered into me, it's never to do a thing like that, to let other people know there's a split of opinion in the family. So Sollazzo figures he gets rid of the old man, I have to go in with him on the drugs. With the old man gone, the family power is cut at least in half. I would be fighting for my life anyway to keep all the businesses the old man got together. Drugs are the common thing we should get into. And his knocking off the old man is purely business, nothing personal. As a matter of business, I would go in with him. Of course, he would never let me get too close. He'd make sure I'd never get a clean shot at him, just in case. But he also knows that once I accepted the deal, the other families would never let me start a war a couple of years later just for revenge. Also, the Tattaglia family is behind him.
If they had gotten the old man, what would you have done?
Sollazzo is dead meat. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if we have to fight all the 5 families in New York. The Tattaglia family's going to be wiped out. I don't care if we all go down together.
That's not how Pop would have played it.
Sonny made a violent gesture.
I know I'm not the man he was, but I'll tell you this, and he'll tell you too. When it comes to real action, I can operate as good as anybody, short range. Sollazzo knows that, and so do Clemenza and Tessio. I made my bones when I was 19, the last time the family had a war, and I was a big help to the old man, so I'm not worried now. And our family has all the horses in a deal like this. I just wish we could get contact with Luca.
Is Luca that tough, like they say? Is he that good?
Sonny nodded.
He's in a class by himself. I'm going to send him after the 3 Tattaglias. I'll get Sollazzo myself.
Michael shifted uneasily in his chair. He looked at his older brother. He remembered Sonny as being sometimes casually brutal, but essentially warm-hearted. A nice guy. It seemed unnatural to hear him talking this way. It was chilling to see the list of names he had scribbled down, men to be executed, as if he were some newly crowned Roman emperor. He was glad that he was not truly part of all this, that now his father lived, he did not have to involve himself in vengeance. He'd help out, answering the phone, running errands and messages. Sonny and the old man could take care of themselves, especially with Luca behind them. At that moment, they heard a woman scream in the living room. Oh, Christ, Michael thought. It sounded like Tom's wife. He rushed to the door and opened it. Everybody in the living room was standing, and by the sofa, Tom Hagen was holding Teresa close to him, his face embarrassed. Teresa was weeping and sobbing, and Michael realized that the scream he had heard had been her calling out her husband's name with joy. As he watched, Tom Hagen disentangled himself from his wife's arms and lowered her back onto the sofa. He smiled at Michael grimly.
Glad to see you, Mike. Really glad.
He strode into the office without another look at his still sobbing wife. He hadn't lived with the Corleone family 10 years for nothing, Michael thought with a queer flush of pride. Some of the old men had rubbed off on him, as it had on Sonny, and he thought, with surprise, even on himself. Chapter 5. It was nearly 4 o'clock in the morning as they all sat in the corner room office, Sonny, Michael, Tom Hagen, Clemenza, and Tessio. Teresa Hagen had been persuaded to go to her own home next door. Paulie Gatto was still waiting in the living room, not knowing that Tessio's men had been instructed not to let him leave or let him out of their sight. Tom Hagen relayed the deal Sollazzo offered. He told how, after Sollazzo had learned the Don still lived, it was obvious that he meant to kill Hagen. Hagen grinned.
If I ever plead before the Supreme Court, I'll never plead better than I did with that goddamn Turk tonight. I told him I'd talk the family into the deal even though the Don was alive. I told him I could wrap you around my finger, Sonny, how we were buddies as kids. And don't get sore, but I let him get the idea that maybe you weren't too sorry about getting the old man's job, God forgive me.
He smiled apologetically at Sonny, who made a gesture signifying that he understood that it was of no consequence. Michael, leaning back in his armchair with the phone at his right hand, studied both men. When Hagen had entered the room, Sonny had come rushing to embrace him. Michael realized with a faint twinge of jealousy that in many ways Sonny and Tom Hagen were closer than he himself could ever be to his own brother. Sonny said,
Let's get down to business. We have to make plans. Take a look at this list me and Tessio made up. Tessio, give Clemenza your copy.
Michael said,
If we make plans, Freddie should be here.
Freddie is no use to us. The doctor says he's in shock so bad he has to have complete rest. I don't understand that. Freddie was always a pretty tough guy. I guess seeing the old man gunned down was hard on him. He always thought the Don was God. It wasn't like you and me, Mike.
Okay, leave Freddie out. Leave him out of everything. Absolutely everything. Now, Sonny, until this is all over, I think you should stay in the house. I mean, never leave it. You're safe here. Don't underrate Sollazzo. He's got to be a Pezzanavante, a real 90 caliber. Is the hospital covered?
Sonny nodded.
The cops have it locked in, and I got my people there visiting Pop all the time. What do you think of that list, Tom?
Hagen frowned down at the list of names.
Jesus Christ, Sonny, you're really taking this personal. The Don would consider it a purely business dispute. Sollazzo is the key. Get rid of Sollazzo and everything falls in line. You don't have to go after the Tattaglias.
Sonny looked at his two capo regime. Tessio shrugged.
It's tricky.
Clemenza didn't answer at all. Sonny said to Clemenza,
One thing we can take care of without discussion. I don't want Paulie around here anymore. Make that first on your list.
The fat capo regime nodded.
What about Luca? Sollazzo didn't seem worried about Luca. That worries me. If Luca sold us out, we're in real trouble. That's the first thing we have to know. Has anybody been able to get in touch with him?
No, I've been calling him all night. Maybe he's shacked up.
No, he never sleeps over with a broad. He always goes home when he's through. Mike, keep ringing his number until you get an answer.
Michael dutifully picked up the phone and dialed. He could hear the phone ringing on the other end, but no one answered. Finally, he hung up.
Keep trying every 15 minutes.
Okay, Tom, you're the consigliere. How about some advice? What the hell do you think we should do?
Hagen helped himself to the whiskey bottle on the desk.
We negotiate with Sollozzo until your father is in shape to take charge. We might even make a deal if we have to. When your father gets out of bed, he can settle the whole business without a fuss, and all the families will go along with him.
You think I can't handle this guy, Sollozzo?
Tom Hagen looked him directly in the eye.
Sonny, sure you can outfight him. The Corleone family has the power. You have Clemenza and Tessio here, and they can muster 1,000 men if it comes to an all-out war. But at the end, there will be a shambles over the whole East Coast, and all the other families will blame the Corleones. We'll make a lot of enemies. And that's something your father never believed in.
Michael, watching Sonny, thought he took this well. But Sonny said to Hagen,
What if the old man dies? What do you advise then, consigliere?
I know you won't do it, but I would advise you to make a real deal with Sollozzo on the drugs. Without your father's political contacts and personal influence, the Corleone family loses half its strength. Without your father, the other New York families might wind up supporting the Tattaglias and Sollozzo just to make sure there isn't a long, destructive war. If your father dies, make the deal. Then wait and see.
Sonny was white-faced with anger.
That's easy for you to say. It's not your father they killed.
I was as good a son to him as you or Mike, maybe better. I'm giving you a professional opinion. Personally, I want to kill all those bastards.
The emotion in his voice shamed Sonny.
Ah, Christ, Tom, I didn't mean it that way.
But he had, really. Blood was blood, and nothing else was its equal. Sonny brooded for a moment as the others waited in embarrassed silence. Then he sighed.
Okay, we'll sit tight until the old man can give us the lead. But, Tom, I want you to stay inside the mall, too. Don't take any chances. Mike, you be careful, though I don't think even Sollozzo would bring personal family into the war. Everybody would be against them then. But be careful. Tessio, you hold your people in reserve, but have them nosing around the city. Clemenza, after you settle the Pauligato thing, you move your men into the house and the mall to replace Tessio's people. Tessio, you keep your men at the hospital, though. Tom, start negotiation over the phone or by messenger with Sollozzo and the Tattaglias the first thing in the morning. Mike, tomorrow you take a couple of Clemenza's people and go to Luca's house and wait for him to show up, or find out where the hell he is. The crazy bastard might be going after Sollozzo right now if he's heard the news. I can't believe he'd ever go against his Don, no matter what the Turk offered him.
Hagen said reluctantly,
Maybe Mike shouldn't get mixed up in this so directly.
Right. Forget that, Mike. Anyway, I need you on the phone here in the house. That's more important.
Michael didn't say anything. He felt awkward, almost ashamed, and he noticed Clemenza and Tessio with faces so carefully impassive that he was sure that they were hiding their contempt. He picked up the phone and dialed Luca Brasi's number and kept the receiver to his ear as it rang and rang. Chapter 6. Peter Clemenza slept badly that night. In the morning, he got up early and made his own breakfast of a glass of grappa, a thick slice of Genoa salami with a chunk of fresh Italian bread that was still delivered to his door as in the old days. Then he drank a great plain china mug filled with hot coffee that had been lashed with anisette. But as he padded about the house in his old bathrobe and red felt slippers, he pondered on the day's work that lay ahead of him. Last night, Sonny Corleone had made it very clear that Pauligato was to be taken care of immediately. It had to be today. Clemenza was troubled, not because Gatto had been his protege and had turned traitor. This did not reflect on the Capo Regime's judgment. After all, Pauli's background had been perfect. He came from a Sicilian family. He had grown up in the same neighborhood as the Corleone children, had indeed even gone to school with one of the sons. He had been brought up through each level in the proper manner. He had been tested and not found wanting. And then, after he had made his bones, he had received a good living from the family, a percentage of an East Side book, and a union payroll slot. Clemenza had not been unaware that Pauligato supplemented his income with freelance stick-ups, strictly against the family rules, but even this was a sign of the man's worth. The breaking of such regulations was considered a sign of high-spiritedness, like that shown by a fine racing horse fighting the reins. And Paulie had never caused trouble with his stick-ups. They had always been meticulously planned and carried out with the minimum of fuss and trouble, with no one ever getting hurt. A $3,000 Manhattan garment center payroll, a small Chinaware factory payroll in the slums of Brooklyn, After all, a young man could always use some extra pocket money. It was all in the pattern. Who could ever foretell that Paulie Gatto would turn traitor? What was troubling Peter Clemenza this morning was an administrative problem. The actual execution of Gatto was a cut-and-dried chore. The problem was, who should the Capo Regime bring up from the ranks to replace Gatto in the family? It was an important promotion, that to button man, one not to be handed out lightly. The man had to be tough, and he had to be smart. He had to be safe, not a person that would talk to the police if he got in trouble, one well saturated in the Sicilian's law of omertà, the law of silence. And then, what kind of a living would he receive for his new duties? Clemenza had several times spoken to the Don about better rewards for the all-important button man who was first in the front line when trouble arose, but the Don had put him off. If Paulie had been making more money, he might have been able to resist the blandishments of the wily Turk, Sollazzo. Clemenza finally narrowed down the list of candidates to 3 men. The first was an enforcer who worked with the colored policy bankers in Harlem, a big, brawny brute of a man of great physical strength, a man with a great deal of personal charm who could get along with people and yet, when necessary, make them go in fear of him. But Clemenza scratched him off the list after considering his name for a half hour. This man got along too well with the black people, which hinted at some flaw of character. Also, he would be too hard to replace in the position he now held. The second name Clemenza considered and almost settled on was a hard-working chap who served faithfully and well in the organization. This man was the collector of delinquent accounts for family-licensed Shylocks in Manhattan. He had started off as a bookmaker's runner, but he was not quite yet ready for such an important promotion. Finally, he settled on Rocco Lampone. Lampone had served a short but impressive apprenticeship in the family. During the war, he had been wounded in Africa and had been discharged in 1943. Because of the shortage of young men, Clemenza had taken him on, even though Lampone was partially incapacitated by his injuries and walked with a pronounced limp. Clemenza had used him as a black market contact in the garment center and with government employees controlling OPA food stamps. From that, Lampone had graduated to troubleshooter for the whole operation. What Clemenza liked about him was his good judgment. He knew that there was no percentage in being tough about something that would only cost a heavy fine or 6 months in jail, small prices to pay for the enormous profits earned. He had the good sense to know that it was not an area for heavy threats, but light ones. He kept the whole operation in a minor key, which was exactly what was needed. Clemenza felt the relief of a conscientious administrator who has solved a knotty personnel problem. Yes, it would be Rocco Lampone who would assist, for Clemenza planned to handle this job himself, not only to help a new, inexperienced man make his bones, but to settle a personal score with Paulie Gatto. Paulie had been his protege. He had advanced Paulie over the heads of more deserving and more loyal people. He had helped Paulie make his bones and furthered his career in every way. Paulie had not only betrayed the family, he had betrayed his padrone, Peter Clemenza. This lack of respect had to be repaid. Everything else was arranged. Paulie Gatto had been instructed to pick him up at 3 p.m. and to pick him up with his own car, nothing hot. Now, Clemenza took up the telephone and dialed Rocco Lampone's number. He did not identify himself. He simply said,
"Come to my house. I have an errand for you."
He was pleased to note that, despite the early hour, Lampone's voice was not surprised or dazed with sleep, and he simply said,
"Okay."
"Good man." Clemenza added,
"No rush. Have your breakfast and lunch first before you come see me, but not later than 2 p.m.
There was another laconic okay on the other end, and Clemenza hung up the phone. He had already alerted his people about replacing Capo Regime Tesio's people in the Corleone Mall, so that was done. He had capable subordinates and never interfered in a mechanical operation of that kind. He decided to wash his Cadillac. He loved the car. It gave him such a quiet, peaceful ride, and its upholstery was so rich that he sometimes sat in it for an hour when the weather was good because it was more pleasant than sitting in the house. And it always helped him think when he was grooming the car. He remembered his father in Italy doing the same thing with donkeys. Clemenza worked inside the heated garage. He hated cold. He ran over his plans. You had to be careful with Paulie. The man was like a rat. He could smell danger. And now, of course, despite being so tough, he must be shitting in his pants because the old man was still alive. He'd be as skittish as a donkey with ants up his ass. But Clemenza was accustomed to these circumstances, usual in his work. First, he had to have a good excuse for Rocco to accompany them. Second, he had to have a plausible mission for the three of them to go on. Of course, strictly speaking, this was not necessary. Paulie Gatto could be killed without any of these frills. He was locked in. He could not run away. But Clemenza felt strongly that it was important to keep good working habits and never give away a fraction of a percentage point. You never could tell what might happen, and these matters were, after all, questions of life and death. As he washed his baby blue Cadillac, Peter Clemenza pondered and rehearsed his lines, the expressions of his face. He would be curt with Paulie, as if displeased with him. With a man so sensitive and suspicious as Gatto, this would throw him off the track, or at least leave him uncertain. Undue friendliness would make him wary. But of course, the curtness must not be too angry. It had to be rather an absent-minded sort of irritation. And why Lampone? Paulie would find that most alarming, especially since Lampone had to be in the rear seat. Paulie wouldn't like being helpless at the wheel with Lampone behind his head. Clemenza rubbed and polished the metal of his Cadillac furiously. It was going to be tricky, very tricky. For a moment he debated whether to recruit another man, but decided against it. Here he followed basic reasoning. In years to come, a situation might arise where it might be profitable for one of his partners to testify against him. If there were just one accomplice, it was one's word against the other. But the word of a second accomplice could swing the balance. No, they would stick to procedure. What annoyed Clemenza was that the execution had to be public. That is, the body was to be found. He would have much preferred having it disappear. Usual burying grounds were the nearby ocean or the swamplands of New Jersey on land owned by friends of the family or by other more complicated methods. But it had to be public so that embryo traitors would be frightened and the enemy warned that the Corleone family had by no means gone stupid or soft. Sollozzo would be made wary by this quick discovery of his spy. The Corleone family would win back some of its prestige. It had been made to look foolish by the shooting of the old man. Clemenza sighed. The Cadillac gleamed like a huge blue steel egg, and he was nowhere near the solving of his problem. Then the solution hit him, logical and to the point. It would explain Rocco Lampone, himself, and Paulie being together and give them a mission of sufficient secrecy and importance. He would tell Paulie that their job today was to find an apartment in case the family decided to go to the mattresses. Whenever a war between the families became bitterly intense, the opponents would set up headquarters in secret apartments where the soldiers could sleep on mattresses scattered through the rooms. This was not so much to keep their families out of danger, their wives and little children, since any attack on non-combatants was undreamed of. All parties were too vulnerable to similar retaliation, but it was always smarter to live in some secret place where your everyday movements could not be charted, either by your opponents or by some police who might arbitrarily decide to meddle. And so, usually, a trusted capo regime would be sent out to rent a secret apartment and fill it with mattresses. That apartment would be used as a sally port into the city when an offensive was mounted. It was natural for Clemenza to be sent on such an errand. It was natural for him to take Gatto and Lampone with him to arrange all the details, including the furnishing of the apartment. Also, Clemenza thought with a grin, Paulie Gatto had proved he was greedy, and the first thought that would pop into his head was how much he would get from Sollozzo for this valuable intelligence. Rocco Lampone arrived early, and Clemenza explained what had to be done and what their roles would be. Lampone's face lit up with surprised gratitude, and he thanked Clemenza respectfully for the promotion allowing him to serve the family. Clemenza was sure he had done well. He clapped Lampone on the shoulder and said,
"Hey, you'll get something better for your living after today. We'll talk about that later. You understand, the family now is occupied with more critical matters, more important things to do."
Lampone made a gesture that said he would be patient, knowing his reward was certain. Clemenza went to his den safe and opened it. He took out a gun and gave it to Lampone.
"Use this one. They can never trace it. Leave it in the car with Paulie. When this job is finished, I want you to take your wife and children on a vacation to Florida. Use your own money now, and I'll pay you back later. Relax. Get the sun. Use a family hotel in Miami Beach so I'll know where I can get you when I want."
Clemenza's wife knocked on the door of the den to tell him that Paulie Gatto had arrived. He was parked in the driveway. Clemenza led the way through the garage, and Lampone followed him. When Clemenza got into the front seat with Gatto, he merely grunted in greeting, an exasperated look on his face. He looked at the wristwatch, as if he expected to find that Gatto was late. The ferret-faced button man was watching him intently, looking for a clue. He flinched a little when Lampone got into the rear seat behind him and said,
"Rocco, sit on the other side." A big guy like you blocks up my rearview mirror.
Lamponi shifted dutifully so that he was sitting behind Clemenza, as if such a request was the most natural thing in the world. Clemenza said sourly to Gatto,
Damn that Sonny. He's running scared. He's already thinking of going to the mattresses. We have to find a place on the west side. Paulie, you and Rocco got to staff and supply it until the word comes down for the rest of the soldiers to use it. You know a good location?
As he had expected, Gatto's eyes became greedily interested. Paulie had swallowed the bait, and because he was thinking how much the information was worth to Sollozzo, he was forgetting to think about whether he was in danger. Also, Lamponi was acting his part perfectly, staring out the window in a disinterested, relaxed way. Clemenza congratulated himself on his choice. Gatto shrugged.
I'd have to think about it.
Clemenza grunted.
Drive while you think. I want to get to New York today.
Paulie was an expert driver, and traffic going into the city was light at this time in the afternoon. So the early winter darkness was just beginning to fall when they arrived. There was no small talk in the car. Clemenza directed Paulie to drive up to the Washington Heights section. He checked a few apartment buildings and told him to park near Arthur Avenue and wait. He also left Rocco Lamponi in the car. He went into the Vera Mario restaurant and had a light dinner of veal and salad, nodding his hellos to some acquaintances. After an hour had gone by, he walked the several blocks to where the car was parked and entered it. Gatto and Lamponi were still waiting.
Shit, they want us back in Long Beach. They got some other job for us now. Sonny says we can let this one go until later. Rocco, you live in the city. Can we drop you off?
I have my car at your place, and my old lady needs it first thing in the morning.
That's right. And you have to come back with us after all.
Again on the ride back to Long Beach, nothing was said. On the stretch of road that led into the city, Clemenza said suddenly,
Paulie, pull over. I got to take a leak.
From working together so long, Gatto knew the fat Caporegime had a weak bladder. He had often made such a request. Gatto pulled the car off the highway onto the soft earth that led to the swamp. Clemenza climbed out of the car and took a few steps into the bushes. He actually relieved himself. Then, as he opened the door to get back into the car, he took a quick look up and down the highway. There were no lights. The road was completely dark. Clemenza said,
Go ahead.
A second later, the interior of the car reverberated with the report of a gun. Paulie Gatto seemed to jump forward, his body flinging against the steering wheel and then slumping over to the seat. Clemenza had stepped back hastily to avoid being hit with fragments of skull bone and blood. Rocco Lamponi scrambled out of the back seat. He still held the gun, and he threw it into the swamp. He and Clemenza walked hastily to a car parked nearby and got in. Lamponi reached underneath the seat and found the key that had been left for them. He started the car and drove Clemenza to his home. Then, instead of going back by the same route, he took the Jones Beach Causeway right on through to the town of Merrick and onto the Meadowbrook Parkway until he reached the Northern State Parkway. He rode that to the Long Island Expressway and then continued on to the Whitestone Bridge and through the Bronx to his home in Manhattan. Chapter 7. On the night before the shooting of Don Corleone, his strongest and most loyal and most feared retainer prepared to meet with the enemy. Luca Brasi had made contact with the forces of Sollozzo several months before. He had done so on the orders of Don Corleone himself. He had done so by frequenting the nightclubs controlled by the Tattaglia family and by taking up with one of their top call girls. In bed with this call girl, he grumbled about how he was held down in the Corleone family, how his worth was not recognized. After a week of this affair with the call girl, Luca was approached by Bruno Tattaglia, manager of the nightclub. Bruno was the youngest son, and ostensibly not connected with the family business of prostitution. But his famous nightclub with its dancing line of long-stemmed beauties was the finishing school for many of the city hookers. The first meeting was all above board, Tattaglia offering him a job to work in the family business as enforcer. The flirtation went on for nearly a month. Luca played his role of man infatuated with a young, beautiful girl. Bruno Tattaglia the role of a businessman trying to recruit an able executive from a rival. At one such meeting, Luca pretended to be swayed, then said,
But one thing must be understood. I will never go against the Godfather. Don Corleone is a man I respect. I understand that he must put his sons before me in the family business.
Bruno Tattaglia was one of the new generation, with a barely hidden contempt for the old mustache Petes, like Luca Brasi, Don Corleone, and even his own father. He was just a little too respectful. Now he said,
My father wouldn't expect you to do anything against the Corleones. Why should he?
Everybody gets along with everybody else now. It's not like the old days. It's just that if you're looking for a new job, I can pass along the word to my father. There's always need for a man like you in our business. It's a hard business, and it needs hard men to keep it running smooth. Let me know if you ever make up your mind.
Luca shrugged.
It's not so bad where I'm at.
And so they left it. The general idea had been to lead the Tataryas to believe that he knew about the lucrative narcotics operation and that he wanted a piece of it freelance. In that fashion, he might hear something about Sollozzo's plans, if the Turk had any, or whether he was getting ready to step on the toes of Don Corleone. After waiting for 2 months with nothing else happening, Luca reported to the Don that obviously Sollozzo was taking his defeat graciously. The Don had told him to keep trying, but merely as a sideline, not to press it. Luca had dropped into the nightclub the evening before Don Corleone's being shot. Almost immediately, Bruno Tattaglia had come to his table and sat down.
I have a friend who wants to talk to you.
Bring him over. I'll talk to any friend of yours.
No, he wants to see you in private.
Who is he?
Just a friend of mine. He wants to put a proposition to you. Can you meet him later on tonight?
Sure. What time and where?
The club closes at 4 in the morning. Why don't you meet in here while the waiters are cleaning up?
They knew his habits, Luca thought. They must have been checking him out. He usually got up about 3 or 4 in the afternoon and had breakfast, and then amused himself by gambling with cronies in the family or had a girl. Sometimes he saw one of the midnight movies, and then would drop in for a drink at one of the clubs. He never went to bed before dawn, so the suggestion of a 4 a.m. meeting was not as outlandish as it seemed.
Sure. I'll be back at 4.
He left the club and caught a cab to his furnished room on 10th Avenue. He boarded with an Italian family to which he was distantly related. His 2 rooms were separated from the rest of their railroad flat by a special door. He liked the arrangement because it gave him some family life and also protection against surprise where he was most vulnerable. The sly Turkish fox was going to show his bushy tail, Luca thought. If things went far enough, if Sollozzo committed himself tonight, maybe the whole thing could be wound up as a Christmas present for the Don. In his room, Luca unlocked the trunk beneath the bed and took out a bulletproof vest. It was heavy. He undressed and put it on over his woolen underwear, then put his shirt and jacket over it. He thought for a moment of calling the Don's house at Long Beach to tell him of this new development, but he knew the Don never talked over the phone to anyone, and the Don had given him this assignment in secret, and so did not want anyone, not even Hagen or his eldest son, to know about it. Luca always carried a gun. He had a license to carry a gun, probably the most expensive gun license ever issued any place, any time. It had cost a total of $10,000, but it would keep him out of jail if he was frisked by the cops. As a top executive operating official of the family, he rated the license. But tonight, just in case he could finish off the job, he wanted a safe gun, one that could not possibly be traced. But then, thinking the matter over, he decided that he would just listen to the proposition tonight and report back to the Godfather, Don Corleone. He made his way back to the club, but he did not drink any more. Instead, he wandered out to 48th Street, where he had a leisurely late supper at Patsy's, his favorite Italian restaurant. When it was time for his appointment, he drifted uptown to the club entrance. The doorman was no longer there when he went in. The hat-check girl was gone. Only Bruno Tattaglia waited to greet him and lead him to the deserted bar at the side of the room. Before him he could see the desert of small tables with the polished yellow wood dance floor gleaming like a small diamond in the middle of them. In the shadows was the empty bandstand. Out of it grew the skeleton metal stalk of a microphone. Luca sat at the bar, and Bruno Tattaglia went behind it. Luca refused the drink offered to him and lit a cigarette. It was possible that this would turn out to be something else, not the Turk. But then he saw Sollozzo emerge out of the shadows at the far end of the room. Sollozzo shook his hand and sat at the bar next to him. Tattaglia put a glass in front of the Turk, who nodded his thanks. Sollozzo asked,
"Do you know who I am?"
Luca nodded. He smiled grimly. The rats were being flushed out of their holes. It would be his pleasure to take care of this renegade Sicilian.
"Do you know what I am going to ask of you?"
Luca shook his head.
"There's big business to be made. I mean millions for everybody at the top level. On a first shipment, I can guarantee you
You want me to talk to my Don?
Sollozzo grimaced.
I've already talked to the Don. He wants no part of it. All right, I can do without him. But I need somebody strong to protect the operation physically. I understand you're not happy with your family. You might make a switch.
Luca shrugged.
If the offer's good enough.
Sollozzo had been watching him intently and seemed to have come to a decision.
Think about my offer for a few days, and then we'll talk again.
He put out his hand, but Luca pretended not to see it and busied himself putting a cigarette in his mouth. Behind the bar, Bruno Tattaglia made a lighter appear magically and held it to Luca's cigarette. And then he did a strange thing. He dropped the lighter on the bar and grabbed Luca's right hand, holding it tight. Luca reacted instantly, his body slipping off the bar stool and trying to twist away. But Sollozzo had grabbed his other hand at the wrist. Still, Luca was too strong for both of them and would have broken free, except that a man stepped out of the shadows behind him and threw a thin, silken cord around his neck. The cord pulled tight, choking off Luca's breath. His face became purple, the strength in his arms drained away. Tattaglia and Sollozzo held his hands easily now, and they stood there curiously childlike as the man behind Luca pulled the cord around Luca's neck tighter and tighter. Suddenly, the floor was wet and slippery. Luca's sphincter, no longer under control, opened. The waste of his body spilled out. There was no strength in him anymore, and his legs folded. His body sagged. Sollozzo and Tattaglia let his hands go, and only the strangler stayed with the victim, sinking to his knees to follow Luca's falling body, drawing the cord so tight that it cut into the flesh of the neck and disappeared. Luca's eyes were bulging out of his head as if in the utmost surprise, and this surprise was the only humanity remaining to him. He was dead. Sollozzo said,
I don't want him found. It's important that he not be found right now.
He turned on his heel and left, disappearing back into the shadows. Chapter 8. The day after the shooting of Don Corleone was a busy time for the family. Michael stayed by the phone, relaying messages to Sonny. Tom Hagen was busy trying to find a mediator satisfactory to both parties so that a conference could be arranged with Sollozzo. The Turk had suddenly become cagey. Perhaps he knew that the family button men of Clemenza and Tessio were ranging far and wide over the city in an attempt to pick up his trail. But Sollozzo was sticking close to his hideout, as were all top members of the Tattaglia family. This was expected by Sonny, an elementary precaution he knew the enemy was bound to take. Clemenza was tied up with Paulie Gatto. Tessio had been given the assignment of trying to track down the whereabouts of Luca Brasi. Luca had not been home since the night before the shooting, a bad sign. But Sonny could not believe that Brasi had either turned traitor or had been taken by surprise. Mama Corleone was staying in the city with friends of the family so that she could be near the hospital. Carlo Rizzi, the son-in-law, had offered his services, but had been told to take care of his own business that Don Corleone had set him up in, a lucrative bookmaking territory in the Italian section of Manhattan. Connie was staying with her mother in town so that she, too, could visit her father in the hospital. Freddie was still under sedation in his own room of his parents' house. Sonny and Michael had paid him a visit and had been astonished at his paleness, his obvious illness. When they left Freddie's room, Sonny said to Michael,
Christ, he looks like he got plugged worse than the old man.
Michael shrugged. He had seen soldiers in the same condition on the battlefield, but he had never expected it to happen to Freddie. He remembered the middle brother as being physically the toughest one in the family when all of them were kids. But he had also been the most obedient son to his father,